Thank you so much to every one of you for being here tonight. Thank you for opening the synagogue. Thank you all for opening your hearts. I feel like I want to hug every one of you. And I know how every one of you, I think I know how every one of you feels. I know how I felt when David Warren called me last night. Thank you, David, for your leadership, and thank you to all of the organizations that participated in bringing together this impressive group. And my feeling was then and now such deep sadness and shock. My family, like yours, celebrated the 8th night last night, and then put our menorah, as we do every night of Hanukkah, in the window of our home. For me, there are few things more beautiful than the sight of that menorah and those candles, bringing back memories of the years when my children were growing up and we celebrated together and still do. And the lights of those candles at this time of year. And what came to mind last night was the shock and horror of that brutal home invasion on the 7th night in Muncie, New York. A special kind of terror inflicted on that family that reflected not just a single incident of hatred, but a surge of anti-Semitism around this great nation, the greatest nation in the history of the world. And what I recalled, as I do so often, was my father's admonition. My father came to this country in 1935. He was 17 years old. He came alone. He spoke no English. He had not much more than the shirt on his back, and he knew no one. And he loved this country more than anyone I know. And when I said to him at one point as a teenager, you know, what happened in Germany could never happen in America, my father said to me, it can happen anywhere. It can happen anywhere. And that is the truth about hatred. Anti-Semitism, hatred of Muslims, hatred of Catholics, hatred of any minority, any religious or racial group can happen anywhere, even in the greatest country in the history of the world. So we are here tonight to say we will not permit it to happen in America. We will not enable it, we will not tolerate it, we will not sanction it. All that is needed for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And that is why you are here. All around this country, there should be gatherings like this one that bring together not just people of our faith, not just Jews, not just in synagogue, but people of all faiths, because no one is safe. It can happen anywhere, and it can happen to anyone. And there should be no tolerance for it. So there are increased resources in the federal budget this year that was approved just about 10 days ago as a result of your advocacy. And I mean the groups that are represented here and individuals because we demanded it. The amount of money has been increased in the federal budget to $90 million for the nation as a whole. Security funding, money for the kind of protection of places of faith that is so desperately needed, and that is only a fraction of what is needed. But more than money, we need commitment on the part of everyone to protecting and preventing this kind of violence. Increased security can protect some places, but not all places. Prosecution, stronger penalties, better laws, yes, but still, good people must come together to condemn and to move forward. I want to thank particularly the people who have come together tonight from other faiths. Bishop Razaza, thank you for being here. Dr. Anwar Saud, Dr. Saud Anwar, who is here not only as a leader in the state legislature, but also of the Muslim community, and others who have come from all parts of our state to say they will not tolerate it either, because hatred is a virus that will affect all of us. So I pledge to you that I will continue this fight, and I know that your support and your advocacy will continue as well. And I thank you for being here tonight, for helping us not only commit ourselves, but to celebrate the human spirit, the spirit of hope and light that is represented by the holiday, the time of Hanukkah itself. Thank you all, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Good evening. On behalf of Governor Lamont and our administration, it is an honor to be able to share a few words with you this evening. The Muncie attack was a horrific display of anti-Semitism. It was a crime of hate, and hate has no place in our state and in our country. And the governor and I are deeply disturbed by this latest in a long line of assaults against Jewish communities across our nation and across the globe. And it's up to all of us to stand together as Americans to condemn this hate and to fight to protect our neighbors from these vicious attacks. And it's a teaching moment, a time to teach tolerance, to teach welcoming, and it's also a time to reflect on what we can do to protect each other. And I will share with you that the Bond Commission has before it funding for houses of worship to reinforce and to increase their security. And we expect that that will be passed sometime in January. The governor and I want you to know that hate has no home in Connecticut, that we are a welcoming state. And if you have the opportunity to look at one of our beautiful blue state of Connecticut flags, you will see on the flag a Latin motto that I think is so appropriate for Connecticut as a state of immigrants and as a place that has welcomed people from near and far. And that motto is, he or she who is transplanted sustains. We are a place that welcomes immigrants and welcomes people of all religions, of all backgrounds, and we are a state that will stand up and fight against discrimination of any kind, against racism, against homophobia, against anti-Semitism, against racism and discrimination of all types. And so on behalf of Governor Lamont and myself, we want you to know that we stand in solidarity with the Jewish community, and we thank you for your work, and we look forward to our continued collaboration to make sure that our state remains an open, welcoming, and warm state. Thank you so much.
Good evening. First, Rabbi, thank you for opening up your house of worship for this important occasion. David, thank you for the phone call, and never apologize again to me for me changing my schedule to do something this important. Like all of us here, I too have been horrified and alarmed and afraid for our nation at the rising level of intolerance, of anti-Semitism, of hate, of bigotry. But, as David mentioned, it's not the existence of these things that define who we are. It's what we do in response to the existence of hate and anti-Semitism. And that's why I am here to stand, to add my voice with all of yours in solidarity to say, no, hate has no place in our nation. We've lived with it for a long time, but we've always known it was wrong. We are an imperfect union, but one that is striving to be better. And here's a moment, unfortunately another moment. We keep having these moments, but as Dr. King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so we cannot lose faith, we cannot lose hope, particularly in this season of hope, of renewal, when the forces of hate and divisiveness in our country would rise and have its ugly head reared again. I come from a tradition of knowing about racism, knowing about hate. I'm here in Connecticut as a result of my parents leaving rural Georgia in the 1950s. And my father always said there were two reasons why he left. One, he said he hated snakes. And the other was the Ku Klux Klan. So my story is a story of struggle and of a family and of a people wanting peace, safety. And so I stand in solidarity with my sisters and brothers of the Jewish faith. And I just returned from a powerful trip to Israel with a group of African American leaders from across the country. And there's so much about that stands out to me that I don't have enough time to talk about tonight. But one of the things was my visit to Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Center, and standing there and awed by the horror and the tragedy that we all know so well, but need to be reminded constantly of what happens. Hitler's rise to power, it wasn't abrupt. It was a slow and steady drumbeat. It was not just his evil, but it was all those who stood silent, all those who were complicit in the hate and the evil that persisted. And so, as a Christian, as an African American, as a father, as a son, as a government official, I want to say to you, and more importantly, because we are all of the same mind. That's why we're here. More importantly, I want to say to those who are not here, to those throughout this country that would seek to divide and to undermine us and to perpetuate hate, that you have a state treasurer in Connecticut, you have a governor, you have a bishop, you have many people of goodwill who say, nope, we're not going to stand for it. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to sit idly by. We're going to raise our voices every time. We're not going to get tired. We're going to stand up. We're going to speak up. We're going to speak out. And that's why I'm here. And so thank you for organizing this. And let's keep up the fight and keep the faith. I want to close with one thing. And John Larson started it. But I was moved. Congressman Lewis is one of my idols, one of my heroes. And he made reference in his remarks to the beloved community. And I just wanted to read something about the beloved community, right? Because what I'm talking about is not just let's be more tolerant, but I'm talking about an affirmative sense of love and engagement in a place in society for everyone. And John Lewis talked about the beloved community, which Congressman Larson spoke of, but I want to read a quote from Dr. King. It says, the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. It is this type of understanding, goodwill, that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles. And we need a miracle in this nation because we are in dark times and we need to bring the light. Thank you so much, and I am with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Slapp, a new state senator here in West Hartford. I do want to acknowledge also a colleague of mine, Representative Jillian Gilchrist, who is here as well, lending her support. I read today about a synagogue, some of you may have read about this, in the Netherlands, that just decided, because of all the recent violence and the attacks, that they were no longer going to post publicly when their worship times were, out of fear, right? And while I understood what they were doing, and the rule now at that synagogue is you have to essentially know somebody to ask somebody, when is the time, right, that people are going to gather. It was heartbreaking to me to see that this community felt like that the safest thing for them to do was to silence their voices, right, and to hide. And again, I'm not being critical of them in any way. It was heartbreaking. And then I got the email about this event, and I said that is, to me, so much more inspiring in terms of what's the response that I think we want to have, is to do the opposite, is to stand together and to speak up and to say that what's going on in this society is unacceptable. And there are a lot of ways that we can fight back. I think being here in this beloved community is absolutely one of them. We also need to make sure that ignorance doesn't spread about what happened and what is still happening. Right? I'm very pleased that we were able to come together as a General Assembly and pass a bill the year before last mandating education about the Holocaust in our public schools. And that's a very important, I think, piece of what we need to be doing. The Lieutenant Governor also mentioned a piece of legislation that I introduced along with Senator Anwar, who's going to be coming up just right after me, to enhance security at houses of worship all across Connecticut. It's actually quite a bit of money if you think about it, just in terms of, Senator Blumenthal mentioned $90 million for the entire country, and we have $5 million set aside as a starting point in the state of Connecticut as part of a matching grant program. I don't mean to get too much in the weeds here, but this is important because the legislation is not passed yet. So we need to get it passed, and we need everybody's support, of course. And then we need to get it called on the bond commission. And I'm so pleased that, and I know that the governor and his administration is going to do that. We had bipartisan support, and that's, I think, what we all want to see, that this shouldn't be a partisan issue. The minority leader in the House stood with us, and we held a news conference, and we had leaders of all faiths come together and said, we absolutely have to do this. And I will say that there were a few people who have been critical and said, this is not how the state should spend money. And we all know that we have financial challenges. I would say, though, that I can't think of anything more important for the state to spend money on than to protect people who want to worship and want to congregate and want to strengthen our community. And one of the fundamental responsibilities of government is to protect its citizens. And we don't have a strong community if people are afraid to worship and if people are afraid to come to places like this. So I'm pleased that we're able to come together, Republican and Democrat, and work together. Our work is not finished, and you are a key part of that. I stand with you, shoulder to shoulder. We're going to work together, and we're going to make change. So much love to all of you, and thank you very much for having me here.
Good evening, everyone. When is enough enough? In about last 7 days or so, there are 10 anti-Semitic attacks in New York alone. In the rest of the country, it's probably too much to count. What happened to the concept that the sacred spaces were safe spaces? What happened to the concept that at this time of the year, when we are celebrating holidays, when we are celebrating Hanukkah, that we will be unsafe and people would come and, God forbid, attack us? What happened to the fact that we could proudly be who we were in the community and be able to wear our kippahs and other ways of describing and celebrating who we are? What happened to all of that? This will require us to have a serious conversation and serious actions. And there are a number of things that we will have to do as a society. The most important thing we have to keep in mind is that we need to recognize that this is not the new normal, period. We cannot allow the ongoing process of hatred becoming the new normal and saying that we will adjust our lives because there is hate that is increasing on the outside. We will have to make policies, we'll have to have strategies to be able to address this. Because the status quo is unacceptable and should be unacceptable to each and every one of us. One of the other things that we have to do is, and I think the families of the synagogue and the rabbi taught us that probably in the finest way possible. After the attack, and after things had settled and everybody was in a safer environment, they said, we will complete the services for Hanukkah. Because that attacker does not define how we celebrate and live our lives and do the work that we do. I think that's going to be the most important thing for all of us to recognize, is that we will define ourselves as communities, and we will not let somebody else define how we pray, how we celebrate. And while we are people of various different faiths, we are one family. And anybody attacks one family, they have attacked the entire family, and we will not stand alone. We will stand united and take on the attack, because if anybody is going to attack my family, you or any other family, I will not be on the sideline. And we will not be on the sideline. We will be together because this is who we are. We are defined by our love for the community and what we are and what we have been, rather than somebody with an agenda which is messed up, to say the least. And we have to deal with domestic terrorism. It is an illness which is manifesting itself in the form of threat, which is at times ideological based. Call it like it is and attack it like it is. Cancer is a cancer, you deal with it. Put the resources, put the policies, give the treatment that it needs. You don't have to be politically correct about it. It needs to be addressed. And if you don't address it, we will be sitting here alone. I want to have conversations with you about good things that are happening in the communities. I want us to have conversations about our families. I want us to have fun. But here we are before the new year, here we are before this, we are talking about anti-Semitism and the hatred which has become an epidemic. And we cannot allow that to be our conversations going forward. We'll have to make policies, address those issues, have a prevention strategy. There are federal bills that are being looked at to actually have domestic terrorism prevention strategies. And again, we have a responsibility to address those things, and then once we are able to do that, we will have to move forward and celebrate our faiths and our communities. These lights are meant for a purpose. We can't let anybody extinguish those. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Ravella. I'm the Commissioner of Emergency Services and Public Protection for the state of Connecticut. I'm also the Homeland Security Advisor to the Governor of the state of Connecticut. I'm in charge of the nuts and bolts, how to protect everybody in the state. My first thought, though, my thoughts and prayers go out to all those deceased victims and their families, and to the injured and their families, and we hope for a speedy recovery for those folks. The Governor is committed to protecting our citizens. He's committed to protecting our faith-based communities. And he's given me instructions that our faith-based communities will not live in fear. They will not worship in fear. An attack on the Jewish community is an attack on us all. It's very simply put, it's an attack on us all. All of law enforcement recognize the need to break down silos and to work collaboratively. During my law enforcement career, I've worked with the Anti-Defamation League in Hartford, the Jewish Federation of Greater Hartford, and as a young chief, I ended up in Israel and learned the importance of security, which I brought back to the city of Hartford in the creation of the Capital City Crime Center, where we realized security for the city is security for the region. And I introduced that to the city and talked about how collaborative we all could be. When we speak of collaboration, Colonel Malikas is here from the state police. He has a detective embedded in New York City in law enforcement. We're connected. And before the news broke it, we were all alerted very early, late Saturday night, Sunday, of the tragedy that occurred. We had information in the very beginning of who the person was, how he was captured by a license plate, how his license plate was run through different license plate readers in different areas of New York City, and how he was captured by brave New York City police officers. We work with the West Hartford Police Department, and I'm very close with Chief Riddick. When we were chiefs, we collaborated constantly. You have a great police department in West Hartford that are devoted to its citizens. In the state, we have the Connecticut Fusion Center, that's called CTIC, where information comes in and where information comes out. And it's placed in the hands of those most adept to handle it, those chiefs, those superintendents of schools. We realize our importance as the turnstile for that information.